Okay, can everyone see my giant screen here?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Cool. So we're going to talk about Lightroom. Lightroom is basically where we store and manage all of our photos. So once you take photos with your cameras, then you will load them into Lightroom. Lightroom is a really nice tool because it's really similar to like the masking that we've been doing in Photoshop, where it is a reversible, non-destructive process. The last thing we ever want to do when we take a great picture is ruin the file. Like, we don't want to edit the original files, and we don't want to do anything that's not reversible, that we can't go back and fix. And so you'll know, like, when you make changes, like if you cut out a chunk of an image in Photoshop and you save it, and then you open it, you can't get that chunk back if you've deleted that chunk. But if you make a mask and you hide that chunk, then you can always go back and look at it and be like, never mind, I really want that chunk to be apparent. And then you can just use the brush tool to fill it in. And so Lightroom works really similar, and we're going to use Lightroom to organize our photos, to judge our photos, to rank our photos, and then to do all our color correcting. So we will do color correcting and cropping in Lightroom, and then in Photoshop, we will just be doing photo stitching and masking. So here, in Lightroom, we're going to talk about how to import images, how to view them, how to change the colors. The important thing to realize about Lightroom is that Lightroom doesn't edit the original file. What Lightroom does is is kind of like a sticky note, in that you have your original file and you save it to your desktop, and then you open it in Lightroom, and what Lightroom is doing is creating kind of a reference kind of overlay on top of it. So Lightroom isn't actually changing that file, it's just creating kind of a link to like, here's what potential edits could look like. So you need to make sure that you remember, when you are going into Lightroom, you're not actually editing the original, and Lightroom doesn't make a new file until you tell it to export it. So it's really important that we make sure that if you want to print a file from Lightroom, you have to export it, because Lightroom is really just a reference to an image, which I think will make a little bit more sense as we continue through this process. But the first things first, once you take all of your photographs for these projects, you need to import them. And so when you open Lightroom, please make sure you're using Lightroom Classic. Lightroom Classic is very important to use. When you open Lightroom, you'll see this navigator panel over here, and it will list kind of all the different places that you might have things saved. And here, what we're first going to do is we're going to create a smart collection. And that will allow us to save everything. So if you're going to take this class and several other photography classes, it might be really helpful to create a smart collection for this year. And so what I do is I have a smart collection in my Lightroom for each year, and then I break it down into projects or months, or whatever kind of organization system is going to make it really easy to move through your images fast. Because if you're going to be doing lots of photography work and you're going to be taking other photography classes, it's really important that you have a way to kind of sort through things quickly. So then I'm going to create a collection set inside of my 2020. Oh, this is where I really struggled to figure it out. There we go. Now, okay, so we need to create a collection set for 2020, and then inside of that, we can create one specifically for this class, so Art 344. And then you'll see that it's kind of in there. And then in there, we can create one for this specific project. So all the pictures that we're taking for that project will then be saved in there, and along with all the edits. And so we can easily separate project 2 from project 3. And then we'll press the import button on the bottom, and you'll put your SD card into your computer. And mine is called EOS Digital. But whatever your SD card that comes out of your camera, you'll stick it in your computer, and it will load all of the pictures you've taken. So every picture that is on an SD card, it will show up. And you'll notice that right now, all of my pictures are checked. So if you have pictures on your SD card that are not from this project, like if you took a bunch of pictures of a friend's wedding and now you took another bunch of pictures for this project, you need to make sure that you only check the images that you want to import. So there's a check all, uncheck all button, but you want to make sure that the ones that you want to import, the ones from this project, are checked. So right here it also is saying that I have 452 photos that I took for Project 2. So you just want to make sure that you check them all. Then you want to tell it where you want them to be saved. Where do you want them to be located? So I always put them on my external hard drive, because the fact that these pictures are going to take up a lot of space. They're big files, they're big images. You want to make sure that you just know where they are located, where they are going. So I recommend saving all of your images to an external hard drive rather than your computer, because you'll realize quite quickly that these 452 photos are going to take up a lot of space on your computer, and then they're going to make Lightroom and Photoshop run slower. So saving them to your external hard drive is going to be really helpful. And then you just want to make sure that you have the same things copied that I do. So you want to make sure that you're copying them as a DNG to a new location, import, convert to DNG, that it says embedded, you don't have the smart previews, you're not importing suspected duplicates. And then I always make a backup file of each of my folder or images, so that I have them in 2 separate locations. So in case something happens to one, I've got the extras. So you can do this. If you put them on your desktop, they're going to take up a lot of room. So if you have 2 external hard drives that you can plug into your computer, great. Then you can put a backup on each one. This step is not necessary. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. And then I can tell it where to put them. So I want them to go in my Art 344 Project 2 folder. So I'm going to say add to collection. But you need to make the collection before you import things. You can also have it rename files to a certain custom text or template if you want. I don't go over that here. You're more than welcome to explore that. That could be a really nice, easy way to start to recognize and understand your photos. So then once you've kind of double checked all those things, you press the import button in the lower right hand corner. So the import button, the worst part about Lightroom is the import button moves from over here to over here. So it's really important that we make sure that we press that. And then this part is going to take forever. So it's a good way to think about, like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna go make myself lunch. And then maybe a cup of coffee, take a nap, and then I'll come back. Because it may take like an hour, depending on how many pictures you have, depending how big they are. So it takes a long time. So you want to make sure that you do that and then have time to take a break. Or that you also don't want to be using your computer during that moment. So it's just really helpful to plan ahead for that to take a long time and for you not to be able to use your computer. So once they are all uploaded, you'll see them kind of in here, right? So we have we have all of our different images. So I have all 442 photos located in this file. They'll show up here. We want to make sure that we're in the library button and not any of these other ones. And then what we'll do is we'll start to go through them and you can right click on them. And so, oh, hold on, let me rewind a little bit. So if you right click on them, then we can start to rate them. We can reject them or not reject them. So right now what I'm doing is I'm just flagging the rejected images. So I'm saying that one's no good, I don't like that, right? And so right now what we want to do is we just want to right click and flag for rejected images. And so you'll just go through and flag any images that feel like they're overexposed or not great, and we'll just go ahead and reject all of the ones that we don't like, right? And you can kind of click on them to see if they're any good. So you can click on this button here, which gives you the grid. You can click on this button, which will give you a single image. And then you can also just scroll through the bottom down here. So you'll see that I'm kind of just scrolling across this, kind of checking out any image using the arrow keys. So you can just click on the arrow keys to scroll through and view them each independently. This should be a really quick process. This is kind of a yes or no. So this is a good way to weed out, I'd say easily 20% of your pictures. Is it blurry? Is it not? Is it overexposed? Is it underexposed? Etc. And so this should be super, super fast. It shouldn't take you a very long time. Like, you shouldn't be spending a lot of time looking at each individual picture. So we're just flagging rejected photos. Now you'll see here that if I, let me rewind to the top. So now you'll see that anything that I flagged as rejected has a little flag with an X in it, right? Which tells me it's still here. I didn't delete it. We never want to delete anything. But then I have the images that haven't been flagged also available here. So I'm going to go to Library Filter, Attributes, and then I'm going to click on Flag. And that's going to just, if I click on the flag, it's just going to show me the pictures that have been rejected. So if I click on like this flag here, it's only going to show me rejected flagged photos. But if I click on the flag next to it, it's only going to show me photos that I have not rejected. So that's an easy way to just immediately view the images that you really want to focus on, the unflagged photos. So that's your first step, is reject photos. And then anything that hasn't been rejected is going to be unflagged. And we'll have all of our images in here, and they look great. So then what we're going to do, once we've done that, is we have to start to rate them, and we have to start to kind of plan which images we really like. And so for this, what we're going to do is we're going to just look through them quite briefly, and we're going to give them certain ratings, and we're going to see how we feel about them. Let me see. Okay, so let me reverse a little bit. So this is similar to the flagging, unflagging, and basically I'll look at a picture and I'm going to set it to a rating. What I'm going to do right now is either rate things a 1 or nothing, okay? So a 1 means it has some potential, okay? So what we're looking for in a 1 is a photo that's not blurry, a photo that is well exposed, and that we're interested in kind of the orientation of the image. So right now, we're not doing anything crazy. This is just another way to eliminate like the next 10%. So you'll rate things a 1 or nothing. And this is really like, is it usable? Does it fit my concept or not? So you're just gonna go through and you can right click and you can set them to a rating of 1. You can also click, or what you can do is you can press 1 on your keyboard. So once you highlight an image, you press 1 and it will give it a rating of 1. And then once we've done that, you can always kind of click up here, and if you just click on the 1, it's only going to show you 1-starred images. So right now, I only have 3 1-starred images. So it says unflagged photos because I have this selected, 1 star or higher. So you can right click and do it that way as well. So right now, you're just looking, is this an image that I can use? Yes or no. Does this fit the concept of the project? Yes or no. Is it in focus? Yes or no. This should be a very quick kind of way to look through and view things quite quickly and get an idea for how they look. Is this possible? So you'll go through and you'll rate them ones or zeros. And so you should end up with 90% of your unrated photos should be ones. If you want to view more images at a moment, you can always click these little arrows on the ends to get rid of those things so that you can just see more stuff at once. And now what you're going to go through is you're going to go through and you're going to look at them. You can zoom in and out, we're still in the library mode. Right now what we're looking for is is this really crisp and clear? Is it well exposed? Does it have potential? Can I start to change it? And now what we're going to do is we're just going to look at our 1-starred unflagged photos. So this is going to remove anything that we didn't give a 1 star to. And so now I'm down to 111 out of 600 photographs here. So now what I'm going to go through is I'm going to go through and I'm going to start giving things 2 stars. And this is kind of a further reduction of kind of filtering out the good photographs, like the photographs that I really want to look at. And you can change the scale of your thumbnails by going here. So if you want to look at a lot at once or less at once, you can go ahead and do that. And so one of the things that I'm really interested in, or that I do as a photographer, is I'll take the same picture at multiple different exposures. And you can see that, if we're looking at here, right? These are multiple different exposures. So this one's the same photo as this, but this one's a little bit lighter, right? This one and this one are the same, but they're a little bit lighter. So now's a decision in which I might be eliminating certain different exposures. Here, 37, 38, and 39 are the same photo, just different exposures. So this might be a moment where I start to settle on a particular exposure. Ooh. So it's just helpful, in this moment to then, once again, we're going to be ranking our photos. We're going to give it a 2 or nothing based on is this a picture that I'm going to continue to go forward with? So we're going to reduce our ratings even further to eliminate even more images. So now I'm going to start to just grade them a little bit further. It's a tedious process. It takes a while, but you can also watch a cool Netflix film while you're doing this, while you're going through ranking everything. This will probably take a lot of time, and so how you set your 2 ranking is by pressing 2 on your keyboard. Click on the image, highlight it, then press 2. And that's all you have to do. And it's really easy and it gives you a nice way. But this should be kind of more of a judgment of, is everything in focus? Is it the right exposure? Is this the right framing? You're getting more critical the more you kind of filter through these photos. And now it's really coming down to which one of these 2 exposures is better for my image. So now if I go to ratings of 2s, I've only got, 4 images, right? So this is an easy way to start to filter through things. And then when I use the ratings 3, 4, and 5 for is specific parts of a project. So if I'm thinking about, project 2, where we're creating this really complex image out of several images, what you might do is use rating 3 for one aspect of your composition, rating 4 for another aspect of your composition, and rating 5 for another kind of concept within that. So then you can use 3, 4, and 5 as other ways of kind of separating and focusing on pictures. So here I only have 4 pictures as a rating 2 because this is kind of 4 pictures that are going to become one photo. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on the Develop tab here at the top. which is going to allow me to do some color correcting because I think this image looks a little blue to me, right? So here you can always use the white balance eyedropper where you click on it and then you click on something that's white in your image and it will automatically white balance the photo. So if you have a white piece of paper laying right here, you can click on this, click on the white piece of paper, and it will automatically adjust things for you. I like to do it manually because I feel like then I can really get what I want. So playing with kind of the temperature and the tint to get something that looks really authentic and real to the real world. But this could also be a moment to think about kind of magic realism, right? If you start to tint things slightly blue or slightly pink, right, then you're going to start to get a much more like an interesting image that could fall into the realm of magic realism. And then I'm going to play with the exposure and the contrast and the highlights to really kind of set the tone and make this like the perfect picture, you know, because I don't want it to be too green, I don't want it to be too warm, I don't want it to be too blue. And so you can go through all of these things. I wouldn't go any further than saturation here. You know, do the white balance, the temperature, the tint, exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, blacks and whites, texture, clarity, saturation. One good rule of thumb that I always use, because now that we are looking at all these things on Instagram and we have all these cool Instagram filters, which I think usually like up the contrast and the saturation of images to the point where like, I think nowadays we all think about that as the aesthetic. And so I often realize that when I develop my photos here in Lightroom, I have a tendency to over saturate things and really bump the contrast up a little bit too high and like a little bit too much. And so what I always do is like, if I bump the saturation to like a 20 and I'm like, that looks great. I know that my eyes are tricking me and I know I'm conditioned by Instagram to look at things a certain way. And if I want this to look really realistic, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna always take whatever I assume the saturation should be and divide it in half. So if I look at something and it's at a 20 right here for the saturation, I'm gonna move it to a 10 because I know that I'm probably thinking it's a little oversaturated. So I do that for kind of every aspect of these, like, because I know that we have a tendency to kind of oversaturate or over contrast things. So that really helps me kind of feel a little bit better about what I'm doing. And this should be kind of a tedious and time-intensive process to really fine-tune all of these things. It should take you a good chunk of time to really go through your exposure, contrast, highlights, blacks, and whites. So down here, you can see that this photo is the one that I just developed, and this one has not been developed. You can see kind of the difference in the color correction process, right? And then this one has a little plus minus next to it, which also signifies, hey, I've been edited in some way. Did I show how to make that? Hold on 1 second. I want to make sure. Give me 1 second. I want to make sure that I'm giving you all the right information. Okay, let me make sure. So what you can do, I'm sorry I don't have a video of this right here, is because I really liked what I did for the first image, once I have that image perfect, right? I've gone ahead, I've edited it, it looks fantastic. And then what I can do is I can go up here to the presets and I press plus, and I can make my own preset that's going to copy and save all of my information in terms of how I developed it. So if I do this image number 1 here, and I change my temperature, my tint, my exposure, all of these things, and I'm really happy with it. Then I can go to plus, and I can make my own preset from that image, and I can title it. So I titled mine Steel Bridge Preset. And then when I get to this image, I can just add the preset to it by clicking on the image and then double clicking on the preset. And then you'll see that it adds this plus. And then what I can do is and you'll see that now these numbers aren't at zeros, they've been edited, right? And then I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna manually adjust the white balance for each one of these pictures individually. So the presets are really nice. I'll make a video and I'll be able to post how to make a preset. I'm sorry that wasn't included here, but it should have been. So I'll kind of go back and forth between these 2 images and really try to get the white balance, the color, temperature, and tint to be very uniform across these 2. And this will be a really intensive time process. Like this will take a long time to do, to really make sure that these 2 pictures look very, very similar. So I'll continue to go back and forth between these pictures for a while. To really fine tune and make sure that everything looks uniform so that when I do go to make this into one image, it looks really, really great. So then once we've decided that we're really happy with the color of it, right, then we might want to also crop or straighten our images. So here in the develop menu, there's all these buttons down here underneath the develop, right? And these are gonna be like your crop, your brush tools, a red eye removal if you need that, but we can also do that manually ourselves. So here I'm gonna color correct this image, I'm gonna make it look really great. And then once I've decided that I'm really happy with how it looks in terms of the color, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go up here to the top and I'm gonna click on the crop button, which is the first one. And this will automatically kind of put this grid over your image. And then I can go through here and I can use this angle button to get really precise with kind of rotating the image. And you'll see that it kind of auto crops it for me. You see how it's doing that so that I don't have any like awkward edges around it. And so this is a nice way. And the lines are really nice because you can see that this line of this image isn't straight. And so I can use the grid that it puts over it to really kind of straighten out that line. So see how straight it looks now? And you can really fine tune this, and it's nice because you can type in the number, you can rotate the image, you can drag this thing. And so those things really help. There's also an auto button if you want to try to see if it will do it automatically for you. And maybe that helps. You can also change the aspect of these, but we won't really be playing with that. So then you can press done, and then you'll notice here that next to the plus, it then has this box, which means not only have you color corrected it, but you have also rotated and cropped it. So you can create, so here, oh great, now I show how to do the presets. So here you can go to a preset and you press the plus, and here it gives you all these different options of what to copy from here. So you can copy the white balance. If you know that you took this picture and the next picture at the same exposure at the same time, and you want them to have the same white balance, you can copy it. That could be really nice. If you change the saturation and the vibrance, you might want to copy the color. If you want to copy the exposure and everything, you can do that. And then over here, if you've done any lens correction or cropping of the image, that could be really helpful. So I recommend that you play around with this, but the presets are really nice if you're trying to edit 10 pictures to then stitch them together. Instead of having to edit each one manually, you can just do it through this. So I'm gonna name it like tower preset because I'm trying to photo stitch a couple of the towers together. So I always try to name something with the date because that helps me know when I was doing this. So then I should be able to easily click on the next image that I wanted to use. And then I just double click and it should color correct it for me. And here I can tell that it color corrected it, but I didn't have the white balance in there because I didn't want it to, like I want to do the white balance manually. So then here I'm just trying to adjust it myself. So then I feel pretty good about that. And so it's easy to go through this process, and once you do it a couple times, it will really start to make sense. So just a couple more of these, just 2 more. So here, I can go through, and here I'm using the white balance thing to warm this picture up, right? The eyedropper, I'm selecting the white of his shoes, and then it kind of warms up the picture really nice and easily. So that's an easy and great tool to use. And so then once I've kind of white balanced and I feel really good about kind of the saturation, the highlights, the contrast, the exposure, I notice here that his face is looking a little bit overexposed while his legs look fine. And so I really want to go ahead and I just want to focus on fixing a little bit of the face. So I'm going to zoom in and kind of get real close. So just so I can look at, do you see how green his skin looks right here on his head? But his ear looks really fine. And so it's these tiny little details that are super important to making a great picture. And so here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the brush tool, which is way over here. And here, essentially what the brush tool does is it creates like little masks where you can then develop them differently. So you'll notice here it's got this plus with a circle around it. So if I go ahead and I click on his forehead, if I use the bracket buttons, the plus bracket and the negative and the left and right bracket buttons, I can increase the scale of the brush. And so now you'll notice that there's this like little white halo here. And then I can go over here and I can change the exposure, the contrast, and the temperature of just that one chunk of his head. So you'll see how if I make it really dark, it gives it like a dark circle. And so this is an easy way to just change the color temperature of one specific aspect of the image that I feel like could use a little bit of work. So I can go through it and I'm going to change a couple things and really kind of try to warm up his forehead because it looks so green. And so that's probably something where playing with the color temperature could really help. And I'm starting to get somewhere. You see how it's starting to be a little bit more warmer of tones. And then I can go through and I can use the same brush and I can start to really edit the whole thing in kind of a uniform way based off of that kind of exposure. So I'm going to make a couple different brushes because I think it really helps to have a few different ones. So once I make one brush, you'll notice that this dot stays in the same spot. And you can change the size of the brush as you move through it so that you can kind of get smaller details and larger details of the face. And so you'll notice here that there's this like one dot. But if I press the new button here, as I'm going to do here in a second, so once I feel like I've done a good kind of under base layer, I can go ahead and I'll press the new button right here to get another mask, a new brush. And you'll notice that when I do it, I now have 2 dots, right? So that's telling me that I have 2 different masks. And so if I use my mouse and I click on this one, I can continue to edit that mask. Or if I click on this one. So it's kind of creating different layers of masking that could be really, really helpful. And so this is a great way to do some really nice detail work and really fine-tune things. So I think on this one image, I end up doing an overall kind of color correcting develop. And then I go in with I think I used 4 or 5 different brushes, specifically just on his head to really kind of warm it up because his head is still looking quite green and cool and not like human-like. So here you can start to see all the different brushes I've used, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So there's a lot of different brushes. And here you can see here are the reference points for all the different brushes that I have used. And then I add one more final brush right there. And so this way, all of a sudden, it looks so much better. It looks way less cool, less green, and more kind of warm and fleshy tones. So I think that's really important to be able to do this kind of minute fine tuning. And then you can see that those kind of stay there and I can click on them and then I can start to edit each one individually. So I can click on that one after I've done it and I could be like, it should be a little greener. And so that's a really helpful tool for kind of doing kind of detail work. So once I've gone through, I think it's just really helpful to kind of get an idea of we can go through and we can look at all the rejected pictures, we can look at all the pictures with no filter, we can look at all the ratings of the pictures with 1s, with 2s, and then here I've got my 3s, and you'll notice that all my 3s are the towers, and my 4 is just this image of this person, and then all my 2s are the bridge. And so that's an easy way to start to sort through things. And so I've narrowed down 450 pictures to just the 11 that I'm going to use for my project. So the rating system is really helpful to just be able to view the pictures that you want to view and that you need to see.